Good evening. It's nice to see everyone out this afternoon. It is our singing night, so I always enjoy getting to see all the younger boys get up here and lead songs, and it's really encouraging. You know, sometimes I wish I could sing just as well as they could, but so just keep that in mind, and all you youngins have your songs prepared, and if and all you young at heart as well, you know, have your songs prepared for when we get into that. But to start off this evening, it's kind of funny that, or it made me chuckle a little bit this morning. Apparently, me and Brother John's minds are kind of running in the same direction, and by that I mean. Where John's lesson this morning, he was talking about how the world was, you know, just whenever you look at the state of the world, it just appears to be evil. Well, that's kind of where I was starting at tonight as well. You know, I think it can be really discouraging watching the news, traveling. You know, I see it when whenever I travel, but it's really discouraging just seeing the state of the world right now. And I don't know if the state of the world is the right way to put it. It's maybe more like the mindset of the people in the world right now. And that mindset seems to be one that's centered around pride. I think whenever, you know, we see it in a lot of other states, but you know, you think about crime. You know, crime's been on the rise. It always astonishes me that that you have people so prideful that they would just walk into a grocery store or a convenience store or gas station or something, just grab something off the shelf and then walk right out. I mean, you know, it just boggles my mind that people will be so prideful. Think about our cultural and our worldly leaders, our political leaders. You know, they get out there and they use the platforms that they have to spread ideas and other things that we know are wrong, but yet they push it as though it's the right thing to do. And then, you know, I hate to admit it, but it kind of, I think. It was probably before my generation, but I think with my generation we really saw it take off. But it's the subjective mindset. In other words, the mindset that a person has when they dictate what is truth to them. They, you know, and I think we see it with especially my generation, but we've seen it with the Generation Z, and I hope the next generation that maybe we can correct that a little bit, but at this point in time, I don't have that much hope, you know, just with the state of things. But to me, there's nothing more prideful than a person that stands up there and says that I know what is right, you know, that I determine what truth is. Instead of a God that created the universe, that gave us our moral code. You know, a person that stands there and says that I know better than God. There's nothing more prideful in my mind than that. So when we look at the Bible, we can go to the Bible and we can pull up numerous examples of pride. You know, just the very sinful nature of pride in the Bible. But, you know, think about Proverbs 16 and 18. Pride goes before destruction, and a haughty spirit before a fall. Or James 4 and 6. But he gives more grace, therefore he says, God resists the proud, but gives grace to the humble. You know, I think that small sentence there speaks volumes. God resists the proud. It's not something that that God wants anywhere near his kingdom. And so when we look at through the Bible, again, there's numerous examples that we could go to, but being a person that enjoys, you know, looking back at history, I thought one of the best examples that we could look at tonight was maybe King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar was a extremely powerful man during his life. But before we get to him specifically, I'll try not to bore you too much, but I wanted to get into the history, a little bit of the history behind King Nebuchadnezzar. So to start off with, the first, by modern day standards, the first true empire that existed was the Akkadian Empire. Now you may be sitting there thinking, well, what about Egypt? Well, Egypt was always a powerful nation, but due to their, a lot of history professionals seem to agree that because of the nature of where Egypt, the nation of Egypt was located, specifically along the Nile, and that it was surrounded by arid desert land, that Egypt never had much of a desire to really push beyond its borders and become what we would consider a modern day empire. So Acadia the Akkadian Empire was one of the first what we would consider empires. That empire would last somewhere around 200 or so years. And it would cover most of the land between the Tigris and the Euphrates River. So basically, if you see those rivers going, along like that, pretty much all of that land in the middle encompassed the Akkadian Empire. But of course, like most empires, eventually there were all kinds of issues, infighting and such, that eventually led to its downfall. And when it fell, there would be two smaller kingdoms that would rise in its place: the Assyrian Empire and the Chaldeans. Of course, these two nations, they would fight for control of the Mesopotamia area for a little while. But eventually, Babylon, or the Chaldeans, or Babylon, would have a king by the name of Hammurabi that would come to power, and through his leadership, Babylon would take over the Mesopotamian area. Not just that, they would surpass the size of the Akkadian Empire. And Babylon at this time, in this time period, would be known as the greatest empire that the world had seen at this point. But again, what seems all too common throughout history, the death of a great ruler would ultimately lead to the fall of the empire. And not long after the death of Hammurabi, the Babylonian Empire at that time would fall into disarray, and the Assyrian army would then overtake the Babylonians. Assyria, as John kind of talked about a little bit this morning, was they were big, they were mean, they were bad. I mean, this empire was one of the largest, if not the largest, in empire in ancient times. Its borders at its peak power would range from over on the right-hand side, or I guess it'd be the left-hand side of Asia, all the way over even down into parts of Egypt. So it was a very large empire. The Assyrian empire would be the one that would actually overtake the nation of Israel during its time, during the time that it was in power. But one of the downfalls of the Assyrian Empire was they never fully conquered, I would say, the Babylonian Empire, and left the Babylonian city-state. And over years, that Babylonian city-state would start to regroup, and with the help of the Medes, they would eventually grow big enough that they could take on the Assyrian the Assyrians. And with lots of infighting and stuff with the Assyrian Empire, the Babylonian Empire, or the Chaldeans, would rise to power once again. And during this time, it would be considered by today's nomenclature, the Neo-Babylonian Empire, or the New Babylon. And it would become, after it overtook Assyria, it would become one of the most dominant empires in the ancient world. Surpassing the original Babylon, it was, for all practical purposes, the center of the world at that point in time. So, who do you think was the one leading the charge in that great dominance of the Babylonian Empire? Well, if you said King Nebuchadnezzar, you would be right. So that leads us into what I wanted to talk about tonight. So you can see that Nebuchadnezzar, he would have a whole lot of reasons to be prideful. Being the king of one of the, under his tutelage, he was the king of one of history's most dominant, powerful nations to exist. And so, I could imagine a king like him would probably, his head, as they say, might not fit between the door, through the door frame. And we kind of see that in the book of Daniel through, some of the interactions that King Nebuchadnezzar has. But when we look at in the book of Daniel, I think there are two examples that I kind of want to focus on tonight regarding King Nebuchadnezzar. And they were two dreams about him. The first was regarding a great statue in which the head on that statue was made of pure gold. And that head was attributed, that head of gold was attributed to King Nebuchadnezzar, symbolizing the greatness of his empire. And then the second dream regarding King Nebuchadnezzar had to do with a great tree, a tree that sprang up. It reached into the heavens. Its branches were broad and wide, and said that this tree could be seen from one end of the earth to the other. And that tree also represented King Nebuchadnezzar, which kind of acknowledged the power, the wealth, the might that King Nebuchadnezzar had during his reign. So let's think about the first vision, or the first dream that Nebuchadnezzar had, that's located in Daniel chapter 2. Excuse me, sorry. So the first dream that King Nebuchadnezzar had, as we said, revolved around a great statue. And this statue, it had a head that was made of gold, arms and chest that were made of silver. It had thighs that were made of bronze, legs that were made of iron, and feet that were made of iron mixed with clay. And during this dream, there would be a stone cut out of the foot of the statue, and that stone would ultimately mean the downfall, or it would leave the entire statue in a rubble, meaning that single stone was greater and more powerful than that statue. And of course, this greatly bothered King Nebuchadnezzar. So he had his chief magicians and such come in and try to interpret the dream, but eventually Daniel was the one that came in and interpreted the dream for him. So looking in Daniel chapter 2, verses 36 through 45, it's kind of a lengthy read, but excuse me. But there are a couple points that I'd like to make from this. It says, "This is the dream. Now we will tell the interpretation of it before the king. You, O king, are a king of kings. For the God of heaven has given you a king, power, strength, and glory. And wherever the children of men dwell, or the beasts of the field and the birds of the heaven, he has given them into your hand and has made you ruler over them all. You are this head of gold." Now, pausing right there, I mean, if I was a ruler, or, if I was in King Nebuchadnezzar's seat, just hearing that my kingdom was the head of gold on this statue, I mean, you can practically hear his head inflating, just standing there, and to the point that, you could almost interpret that might have been the main thing that King Nebuchadnezzar took away from this dream, is that he was the head of gold. But after you shall arise another kingdom inferior to yours, then a third kingdom of bronze, which shall rule over all the earth. And the fourth kingdom shall be as strong as iron, inasmuch as iron breaks in pieces and shatters everything. And like iron that crushes that kingdom will break in pieces and crush all the others. Whereas you saw the feet and toes partly of potter's clay and partly of iron, the kingdom shall be divided, yet the strength of the iron shall be in it. I apologize. It's allergy season for me, and it can be a little tough to do a lot of talking. So, just as you saw the iron mixed with ceramic clay, and as the toes of the feet were partly of iron and partly of clay, so the kingdom shall be partly strong and partly fragile. As you saw iron mixed with ceramic clay, they will mingle with the seed of men, but they will not adhere to one another, just as iron does not mix with clay. And in the days of these kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom which shall never be destroyed, and the kingdom shall not be left to other people. It shall break in pieces and consume all these kingdoms, and it shall stand forever, inasmuch as you saw that the stone was cut out of the mountain without hands, and that it broke in pieces the iron, the bronze, the clay, the silver, and the gold. And the great God has made known to the king what will come to pass after this. The dream is certain, and its interpretation is sure. So again, kind of stating the obvious, but you can imagine that King Nebuchadnezzar's pride was probably swelling at this point, knowing that his nation, what the empire that he had built, was looked at as the head of gold. Head being the primary part of a body, and the gold, especially at this time, was a signifier of wealth and power. And so, based upon how King Nebuchadnezzar acts later in the book, I would say that he probably didn't pay too much attention to that later part, because if he had, he would understand that there would be coming a kingdom that his kingdom was inferior to. I don't got the empires. But in this case, I think oftentimes we see that when people become too big, they are oftentimes brought low, and King Nebuchadnezzar was no exception. So thinking about the second dream, was one about a tree, and as it grew, and it grew, and it just encompassed the earth. It was, it grew into the heavens. Its branches were broad and strong, and it says that people and animals would come and find shelter in the tree. Its fruit would provide for all those in its midst. That the tree would be could be seen from one end of the earth to the other, and that tree, by all measures, was the center of the world, which kind of attests that to what King Nebuchadnezzar had built. The empire during his reign really was kind of the center of the world in at that time, the ancient world. It was so big and powerful. But one thing about the dream was that just as this tree was big and mighty, all of a sudden a voice commanded it to be cut down. And so it was cut down. And so that kind of leads us into Daniel chapter 4 and verse 29 through 33. It says, "At the end of the 12 months, he was walking about the royal palace of Babylon. The king spoke, saying, 'Is not this great Babylon that I have built for a royal dwelling by my mighty power and for the honor of my majesty?' While the word was still in the king's mouth, a voice fell from heaven, 'King Nebuchadnezzar, to you it is spoken. The kingdom has departed from you, and they shall drive you from men, and your dwelling shall be with the beasts of the field. They shall make you eat grass like oxen, and 7 times shall pass over you until you know that the Most High rules in the kingdom of men, and gives it to whomever he chooses.' That very hour the word was fulfilled concerning Nebuchadnezzar. He was driven from men and ate grass like oxen. His body was wet with the dew of heaven, till his hair had grown like eagle feathers, and his nails like birds' claws." So you kind of see the picture here is, again, this event is taking place about a year after the dream about the big tree being cut down. And, if it was me, I think I would have that image in the back of my mind. But apparently, what King Nebuchadnezzar saw that or thought he had built just kind of overpowered his reason at that point. And so what we see is King Nebuchadnezzar walks out, looks over everything that he's built, and starts trying to take credit for it as though it was his might and his power that built everything that he had. And immediately he's humbled. And I think that's, we see the power of God working there is that no matter how powerful, how big, how mighty a person may be, God can always humble someone. So I think in the end, we see that the result of this ordeal of King Nebuchadnezzar being brought low, having to, eat grass basically like an animal, is essentially how he became. We see that it caused a change of attitude in King Nebuchadnezzar. Excuse me. Look with me in Daniel chapter 4, verse 37. It says, "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and extol and honor the King of heaven, all of whose works are truth, and his ways justice, and those who walk in pride he is able to put down." So, again, King Nebuchadnezzar in the end had a change of attitude about where he fell in comparison to God. And even though he was allowed to eventually return to his throne, God had humbled him. So as we go throughout our days and throughout our lives, I think the words of Nebuchadnezzar here are something to keep in mind. Any who walk in pride God can humble. And the thing is, if we're not humble now, one day we will be. So that leaves us a choice. Are we going to live a life full of pride, making selfish decisions that revolve around me? Or are we going to humble ourselves, allow our will to be molded to God's, and live for Him?